By late afternoon, Riverside Park looked exactly the way it did before. The yellow police tape was gone, the playground swings creaked in the wind, and the fountain still sputtered its thin stream of water. Yet every adult on those benches knew nothing here was normal anymore. Two mothers sat on the far side of the playground, voices hushed, eyes fixed on the empty bench near the big oak tree. That was where it had happened, where a uniformed officer had raised his hand and cracked the air open across a black woman's face while her little girl watched. Inside the corner bodega across the street, the TV over the chips aisle played the story on loop. Mrs. Carter wiped down her counter, but her eyes never left the screen. Federal agent assaulted by Chicago police officer in public park. The anchor cut to footage. A freeze frame of Kesha Washington caught mid-step, holding her sobbing 8-year-old Amara. Her face was blurred in some shots, not in others. Kesha's expression was unsettling, a mix of calm and exhaustion, like someone who had seen worse, yet still could not believe this was her life as a mother. Kids in the neighborhood had started asking questions. Are cops the bad guys now? Do they hit moms? Parents had no easy answers. Some families simply stopped coming to the park at all. Across town, in a cramped office at Chicago Police Headquarters, Commander Patricia Hayes watched the same video with the sound turned off. The slap did not need volume. She saw her officer's face, the way his hand moved, the way the woman did not flinch when she turned back toward him. Hayes felt something cold slide into her gut. In the locker room down the hall, Officer Maria Rodriguez stared at the clip on her phone. Her thumb hovered over the pause button as the moment replayed again and again. She saw herself in the background, a half step behind, doing nothing. Her hand trembled so badly she finally set the phone down. At the FBI field office, the lights were dim in an interview room turned temporary sanctuary. Special Agent Kesha Washington sat alone in front of a mirror, jacket off, dark hair pulled back. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a yellow shadow, but when her fingertips found it, her touch was careful, clinical, the way she handled evidence. He thought he was just slapping a black single mom, she thought, watching her own reflection blink back at her. He had no idea he was striking at the federal government's case file with his bare hand. On the desk beside her, a stack of reports waited. 3 weeks of quiet surveillance in Riverside Park. 17 documented encounters, names, dates, faces, families who had been told in 100 different ways that they did not belong on the grass their taxes helped pay for. Before that slap, Kesha had been just another mother trying to keep her daughter safe in a world that asked too much of girls who looked like Amara. After it, she became something else, something heavier. A living witness for every family that had ever been told, in words or in silence, "You do not belong here." On Saturday mornings, before the city remembered all the reasons it was tired, Southside Chicago could almost feel gentle. Kesha Washington sat behind the wheel of her aging Honda, watching her daughter in the rearview mirror. Amara's cleats tapped against the seat, a staccato rhythm of 8-year-old impatience. "Mama, we're gonna be late." Coach Mark said on time is on time, early is on time, and late is a problem, Kesha finished, smiling. I know. We're 3 minutes away. You'll still be early. FBI time. Remember, Amara scrunched her nose. You're not FBI today. You're soccer mom today. If only it worked like that, Kesha thought, pulling up beside the half-marked soccer field behind the elementary school. Out loud, she said, "You get 10 shots on goal, and afterward, we get hot chocolate. Deal." Deal? Amara grinned, already halfway out the door. Kesha watched her daughter join the small crowd of kids, all mismatched jerseys and floppy ponytails. It was the most ordinary scene in the world, which was precisely why she clung to it. On the way to Riverside Park, she stopped at the corner bodega out of habit more than need. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped in. The smell of coffee, fryer oil, and yesterday's newspapers wrapped around her like something familiar. "Morning, baby," Mrs. Carter called from behind the counter. "My favorite government lady. You still saving the world or just collecting those boring checks?" "Something like that," Kesha said, dropping a few bills on the counter. "Just trying to keep the paperwork from eating us all alive." Mrs. Carter leaned in, lowering her voice. "Long as that job of yours keeps the bad ones from messing with this little girl, I'll keep your coffee hot and strong." She nodded toward the door, where Amara was carefully counting the cracks in the sidewalk. Kesha's smile faltered for half a second. "That's the idea," she said. "Government work has to be good for something. Her phone buzzed as they crossed toward the park. A familiar secure notification slid across the screen. Priority field update from Deputy Director Sarah Mitchell's status check. Riverside observations. Any escalation. Kesha's thumbs moved quickly as she walked. Ongoing surveillance. Pattern holding. No physical contact yet. Recommend continued presence during peak family hours. A moment later, the reply came. Copy. Maintain cover. Document everything. We have your back. We have your back. The words sat warm in her chest. She had spent 13 years building a career on that promise, that if she did everything by the book, if she kept her body wired and her reports clean, the system would do what it was supposed to do. She chose the same bench as always, the one beneath the big maple with a clear view of the playground, the basketball court, and the path where the patrol car usually rolled through like it owned the place. She sat with her back to the tree, legs crossed, coffee cupped in both hands. To anyone passing by, she was just another tired mother, half scrolling, half watching. Only a trained eye would notice the way she scanned the park in grids, how her gaze lingered on uniforms, how her phone screen flashed more with encrypted notifications than social media. Her notes from the past 3 weeks ran through her mind as she watched. White dad with golden retriever joked with officers. No ID check. Black teen asked to empty pockets near the court. Latino family told the playground was closing. Park stayed open another hour. She had names now to go with the patterns. Officer Derek Whitman, tall, broad shoulders, jaw that always seemed clenched. Officer Maria Rodriguez, shorter, quieter, eyes that always looked like they wanted to be somewhere else. A shadow fell over her one afternoon that first week. She looked up to see an older Latina woman clutching a tote bag and a little boy's hand. "Excuse me," the woman said. Her accent wrapped around the words like a soft coat. "Do you come here a lot?" "Sometimes," Kesha replied. Her gaze flicked briefly to the boy. "Miguel," according to the name stitched on his jacket. "You okay?" The woman glanced over her shoulder toward where the patrol car had disappeared down the path. "That tall one, the mean one. He told us last week this park is not for our kind of family. He said the big kid equipment is for appropriate families only." She swallowed hard, shame and anger mixing in her eyes. What does that mean? Appropriate families. Kesha felt the familiar spark of rage buried deep. She kept her voice even. "It means he's wrong," she said. "You have every right to be here. Did you file a complaint?" The woman's laugh was brittle. "We tried once. Nothing happened. Next time, he just stared at us until we left." Her grip on Miguel's hand tightened. "I bring him here because it is close, you know, but maybe we should stop." Kesha logged another entry in her mental file. Another family learning how to shrink themselves to fit inside someone else's comfort. That night, her friend Janet Kim called as Kesha finished typing up her summary for the week. Janet's voice came through with the dry humor only an assistant U.S. attorney who had seen too many bad reports could carry. "You still babysitting Riverside Park? More like babysitting due process," Kesha said. "Thought you prosecutors liked having airtight cases." Janet snorted. "I like justice. Attaching my name to trash internal investigations is not justice." "Listen, Kesha, do not put too much faith in CPD's internal review process. Guys like this Whitman, the system is built to shield them. Not you, not your people." "I have cameras," Kesha countered. "I have timestamps. I have 3 weeks of pattern data. At some point, the numbers tell their own story." "That's cute. You still believe in math?" Janet said softly. "Just remember, we only see the cases that survive the first layer of denial." Kesha leaned back in her chair, staring at the faint reflection of her own face in the laptop screen. She could hear the warning under the sarcasm. And still, something in her refused to let go of the belief that facts properly presented would win. "I'll bring you something you can't ignore," she said. "Video, witnesses, reports." "He can't bully an entire park forever," Janet exhaled. "Just be careful. Badge or no badge, they do not always see you as one of them." After the call, Kesha checked on Amara. The girl was asleep, arms wrapped around a stuffed panda, brow furrowed even in rest. On the nightstand was a crayon drawing of a police car. Half the page was blue and red lights. The other half was a stick figure with long hair holding a child's hand, both colored brown. The next day at school, the principal had mentioned some of those drawings. Amara has been asking if police are good guys or bad guys, she had said gently. Is everything all right at home? Keisha had smiled it away. Just grown-up worries leaking out, she had replied. I'll talk to her. What she did not say was that she was terrified of the day her daughter would see her take a hit and not be able to hit back. That the worst thing she could imagine was not a broken bone or a public humiliation, but the look in Amara's eyes if she ever saw her mother powerless in the face of injustice. Back at Riverside Park, the afternoon sun dipped lower as Amara pumped her legs on the swing. Mama, look, I'm flying, she called. You are, baby, Kesha answered, adjusting her position so she could cover the basketball court and the entrance path at the same time. Just one more week, she told herself. A few more documented incidents, a few more witness statements. Then she could hand the whole package to DOJ, take her daughter somewhere that did not require this constant calculation. Just one more week, and we are done with this place. Across the street, an engine turned over. Kesha did not look up immediately. She finished typing the last line of her note, thumb hovering over save. She only raised her head when the familiar sound of tires on gravel reached her ears. The black and white patrol car eased onto the park path, sunlight flashing off its windshield, washing over the faces of the children on the swings like a warning. At least, that was what she believed in that small sliver of time before Officer Derek Whitman's car rolled fully into view. The patrol car crawled along the gravel path like it was measuring the park. Conversations thinned. A basketball bounced once, twice, then stopped. Even the birds seemed quiet as the doors opened. Officer Derek Whitman stepped out first, big body filling the space between the benches and the playground. His hand rested on his belt, not on his weapon yet, but close enough to send a message. Behind him, Officer Maria Rodriguez climbed out more slowly, shoulders tight, eyes scanning in a different way. She saw people. He saw problems. Kesha felt her pulse pick up, a familiar surge of adrenaline that usually came right before an arrest or a raid. Only this time, she was the one sitting on the bench with a child on the swing set behind her. She slid her phone onto her thigh, screen dark but camera already recording. Do not move first, she reminded herself. You are a witness. Whitman cut straight across the grass toward her bench. He did not bother to hide the way he sized her up. Old hoodie, worn jeans, scuffed sneakers. A black woman alone with a little girl. In his mind, the file was already written. Afternoon, Mom, he said, stretching the manners so they sounded like an insult. We have had some complaints. Kesha looked up at him slowly. Complaints about what exactly, officer? He did not like the way she said officer, like she knew the right word and the weight behind it. About certain people hanging around here, making other families uncomfortable. His eyes flicked to Amara on the swing, then back. People who do not really belong. There it was, not even subtle. Reasonable suspicion of what, she asked, voice steady, sitting on a bench, watching my child play. His jaw clenched. When he spoke again, the professional veneer cracked. Look around, he said. Look at these families. Then look at you. You really want me to spell it out. He spat the next words the way other people spit gum. Things she had heard as a kid in grocery store aisles, outside school dances, standing next to squad cars long before she ever worked inside a federal one. Words she had thought she had climbed above when she put on a suit and carried a government badge. You people bring drama. You people make folks nervous. This park is supposed to be safe for kids, not daycare for your situation. Behind him, Maria shifted. Derek, enough, she murmured. She is with her kid. He ignored her. Kesha felt the metal edge of her badge case pressing against her hip, just inside the zip of her bag. She could picture it in her hand, could hear the words as clearly as if she had already spoken them. Special Agent Washington, FBI, Civil Rights Division. You are interfering with a federal investigation. In that version of the afternoon, he would step back, maybe curse under his breath, maybe stammer some excuse. The power would swing back toward her. The videos would show a triumphant reveal. Her daughter would sleep easier knowing that her mother was not just any mom on a bench. But the file in her bag was not done yet. The families in her notes did not have badges to pull. The The point of this whole assignment was to capture on record how officers acted when they believed they were dealing with someone who had no power, no connections, no shield. If I show him who I am, she thought, I save myself and I lose everyone else. He leaned closer, breath hot, lips curled. Here is how this works, he said. You pack up your little one and you move along, or I start making phone calls. Maybe Child Protective Services would like to hear about a mother who spends all day loitering instead of providing a proper environment. Those are serious allegations, Kesha replied. Her lawyer voice slipped out, clean and precise. Are you saying you have a specific concern about my child's safety? Or are you threatening to fabricate a report because you do not like how I look? Around them, a few white parents shifted on their benches. One father stood half up, then sank back down when Wittman's hand brushed his holster. A jogger slowed to a walk and pulled her phone out, angling it toward the scene as if she were tying her shoe. No one stepped between them. Not yet. Derek, Maria said again, louder this time. She is not doing anything. Let it go. He glanced over his shoulder for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Kesha to see the fork in the road. He could hear his partner clock the phones, decide the risk was not worth it. He could walk away, chalk this up as a bad mood, and move on to another park on another day. But years of being backed up by thin reports and thicker silence drowned out the warning in Maria's voice. He saw the cameras. He just did not believe they meant anything. Lady, he snarled, turning back to Kesha, you think using big words and attitude is going to save you. You are not special. You are another mouth on the system. I do this job every day. I know your type. My type, she repeated. Her heart hammered, but her tone stayed cool. Do you often threaten to remove children from their parents for sitting on public benches? Or is that reserved for black mothers in parks like this one? The word black hung between them. A fact, a history, a wound. He took one more step into her space, so close she could see the coffee stain on his collar, the twitch at the corner of his eye. Kesha felt the bench press into the back of her thighs. Somewhere behind her, chains rattled as swings slowed. You are done asking questions, he hissed. You are going to learn your place. In that moment, everything narrowed. No sound, no wind, no playground noise. Just the heat of his anger and the cold weight of the decision waiting in her bag. Show him. End this. Keep your daughter from seeing what happens to women who talk back. Stay quiet. Let him show the world exactly who he is when he thinks no one matters. Her fingers curled away from the zipper of her bag. Behind Derek's shoulder, a blonde woman at the sandbox lifted her phone and hit record, jaw clenched. A teenage boy near the court did the same, holding his hoodie sleeve over half his face. They were not brave enough to stand between them, but they were no longer invisible either. Kesha met Wittman's eyes, refusing to drop her gaze. You are a public servant, officer. If you have a lawful reason for this contact, state it. If not, I will be filing a complaint with your department for harassment and discrimination. Her voice carried, clear and measured. It was the kind of sentence that belonged in a courtroom, not on a patch of grass next to a jungle gym. She saw the way his nostrils flared, the way humiliation burned hotter in him than any fear of consequences. One decision, less than a second. Somewhere inside the uniform, a man who could have backed down chose instead to teach a lesson. His shoulders shifted, his arm moved. Not the way an officer moves to protect, to shield, to restrain. The way someone moves when they want to hurt, to mark, to remind. The sound that followed cracked through the park like a branch snapping under too much weight. Every head turned at once. A mother at the far end of the playground gasped. The basketball rolled out of bounds and kept going. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Amara's voice ripped through the silence. Mama Kesha did not see her daughter leave the swing. She only felt the rush of small footsteps pounding across the mulch, heard the raw panic in that one word, Mama. It carried terror and disbelief, and something breaking that could not be easily repaired. People would later talk about the videos, the angles, the slow-motion replays on the news. But for the children who watched, there was only that sound and the sight of a mother's world tilting off its axis. That night, both Derek Wittman and Kesha Washington stared up at their ceilings long after the city went quiet. Neither of them slept, but for reasons that could not have been more different. By Sunday morning, Kesha's face had traveled farther than she ever had. It started with Mrs. Carter's shaky video, uploaded to Facebook with a simple caption, I can't believe this just happened at our park. Within an hour, her niece had shared it on Twitter. The jogger's clip hit TikTok, cut with zooms and slow motion. The sound of that crack amplified so loud you could hear people flinch through the screen. By noon, the same 30 seconds of horror played on phones in barbershops, nail salons, church parking lots. The hashtags found each other like magnets. Riverside Park incident. For justice for Kesha. On Kesha's block, neighbors watched the video in their living rooms, then looked out their front windows toward her building with a new mix of sympathy and fear. Her phone buzzed nonstop on the coffee table. Is this you? I just saw the video. Are you okay? I take my kids to that park all the time. I am done. From an old co-worker at a temp job years ago. Girl, I knew you had a backbone, but they really did that to you. To all of them. She wrote some variation of the same thing. I am home. I am safe for now. Thank you for checking in. She did not mention the FBI. To the world right now, she was exactly what Whitman had decided she was. A single black mom in a hoodie, slapped in a public park for daring to sit where she could see her child. In the middle of the night, Amara had crawled into her bed, shaking so hard the mattress rattled. Mama, she whispered, eyes wide open in the dark. What if he comes here? He is not coming here, baby, Kesha said, pulling her close. Her own heartbeat sounded too loud in her ears. You are safe in this house. The next afternoon at school, her teacher, Miss Patterson, called. We had a moment in class, she said quietly. I thought you should know. What happened? We were doing community helpers, who do you call in an emergency? And Amara raised her hand and asked, if a police officer hits my mom, who am I supposed to call? Another police officer or somebody above them. Kesha closed her eyes, hand gripping the back of a kitchen chair. What did you say? She asked. I told her there are people whose whole job is to make sure police follow the rules, Ms. Patterson replied. That what happened to you is not okay, and that she could always tell a grown-up she trusts. She paused. She asked if you were in trouble because you talked back. For a second, Kesha saw herself the way Amara must have seen her. Small on that bench, a big man in uniform towering over her. The cameras did not catch the moment her daughter realized that her mother was not shielded by anything, not even the idea of justice. Thank you for telling me, Kesha managed. I will talk to her tonight. Across town, in a conference room at District 18, the incident lived in a different language. Disturbance at Riverside Park, the sergeant read from the report, flipping pages. Female, mid-30s, agitated, non-compliant. Officers say she refused repeated instructions to vacate the area and created a hostile environment. No physical contact reported. Commander Patricia Hayes stared at the paperwork, then at the small TV mounted on the wall, where the same park played on mute. The network graphic at the bottom of the screen read, questionable use of force in Chicago Park goes viral on the video. She saw Officer Whitman step into the frame, face tight, body coiled. She saw the woman stand, lips moving calmly. She saw his hand flash forward in a blur. Hayes tapped the report with one finger. No physical contact, she repeated. The briefing room was crowded with uniforms. Some shifted uncomfortably, following her gaze to the screen. Others stared straight ahead, jaws set. One officer in the back muttered, people edit these things. You never see what leads up to it. Folks always act innocent once the camera is rolling. Yeah, someone else agreed. Derek has been out there for years. He knows what he is doing. If she got checked, she probably earned it. Two younger officers, both black, traded a quick glance and kept their mouths shut. One of them had grown up a mile from Riverside. His little sister still played there on weekends. He swallowed hard and stared at the table, feeling the familiar weight of choosing which part of himself to betray. Hayes turned the TV off with a jab of the remote. I want every complaint with Whitman's name on it on my desk by the end of the day, she said. And I want to know why I am hearing about viral video from the news before I hear about it from my own people. No one answered. The scrape of chairs on tile and the rustle of paper filled the room as they filed out. Back in the neighborhood, the stories multiplied. At the bodega, Mr. Johnson leaned on the counter watching Kesha's video on replay. He stopped my boy last month, he told Mrs. Carter, voice low. 10-year-old just shooting hoops by himself. Made him empty his pockets right there on the court. Said he looked suspicious. We complained. They said there was no evidence. Mrs. Vasquez chimed in from the doorway, grocery bag on her hip. He told my kids the slide was for real families, she said, cheeks flushing at the memory. When I asked what that meant, He just stared at me until we left. And you know what I thought, that maybe we should. That maybe we did not belong. Now, bathed in the blue light of a cracked phone screen, that shame shifted into something else. This time there is a camera, she said. Before, it was just our word against the badge. At the park itself, grandparents and parents stood in small clusters, arguing quietly over whether to keep bringing their children there. If we stay, we are targets, one woman said. If we stop coming, he wins, another replied. None of them knew that the woman on the screen, the one who took the hit and did not fall apart, had already sent 3 coded messages that were making their way through federal servers. That night, Kesha sat alone at her kitchen table, the overhead light casting a harsh circle on the scratched wood. Amara had finally fallen asleep after insisting on leaving the bedroom lamp on and checking the lock on the front door twice. Her phone lay face up, notifications stacked one over another. From her sister, "I saw it. I'm trying not to drive over there right now. Say the word, and I am pulling my niece out of every place that badge can reach." From Janet, "I just watched the footage. Tell me you are documenting every second of this. And tell me you know you do not have to carry it alone." From Deputy Director Mitchell, "Seen the social media traffic. Need full incident report when you are ready. Your safety and your child come first." We will take it from there. Kesha stared at the 3 messages, at the thin, glowing lines that tied her to family, to the law, to a system that suddenly felt as fragile as glass. She had spent her entire career telling other people to come forward, to stand up, to trust that the process would protect them if they were brave enough to speak. Now, for the first time, she understood how it felt to be on the other side of that conversation. This time, she realized she was the one who no longer had anywhere left to retreat. The call came just after 7 on Monday morning, interrupting Commander Patricia Hayes' first sip of coffee and what she had hoped would be a quiet review of weekend reports. "Commander Hayes, this is Deputy Director Sarah Mitchell, FBI, Chicago Field Office." The voice on the other end was calm, clipped, not the kind of federal tone that called to chat about interagency cooperation. "Yes, Deputy Director," Hayes replied, already straightening in her chair. "I assume this is about the Riverside Park disturbance." Silence crackled for half a beat. "We do not consider it a disturbance," Mitchell said. "We consider it a federal crime. The woman your officer struck yesterday is Special Agent Kesha Washington, Civil Rights Division. She has been undercover in your district for 3 weeks." The mug slipped from Hayes' hand and shattered in the trash can beside her desk. Coffee spread in a dark stain over the latest use of force statistics. "I am sorry," she said slowly. "Could you repeat that, Special Agent Washington?" Mitchell repeated. "She has been documenting discriminatory enforcement patterns in and around Riverside Park. The incident you are currently classifying as a minor disturbance is an assault on a federal agent in the performance of her duties, while she was investigating one of your officers." Hayes groped for the printed report on her desk, eyes scanning the familiar lines. "Female, mid-30s, agitated, possibly under the influence. No physical contact reported." Her own initials sat at the bottom, approving the summary. "You should know," Mitchell added, "that the videos she collected, along with civilian recordings and park surveillance, show a very different version of events." In the FBE's Chicago field office, Conference Room B had been transformed into a war room. The far wall was covered in photographs and printed complaint forms. The Rodriguez family, the Hernandez kids, Mr. Johnson's son holding a basketball. A timeline of dates ran along the bottom. Red string connecting incidents across 3 years. 17 documented encounters, Kesha said, standing at the front with a remote in her hand. 43 civil rights violations we can substantiate with witness statements, video, or corroborating documents. All of them dismissed as unfounded or resolved by counseling. The first slide showed Mrs. Rodriguez clutching Miguel's hand at the foot of the slide. August 5th. Ordered off the playground. Officers said the equipment was for appropriate families only. Next came the Hernandez children standing outside the fence with their backpacks still on. Then Mr. Johnson's boy, pockets turned out on the court. A pattern emerges, Kesha continued, her voice even. Black and Latino families asked to leave public spaces at a significantly higher rate than white families. Children questioned, searched, or intimidated without articulable suspicion. Deputy Director Mitchell watched from the end of the table, flanked by Department of Justice attorneys and a team from the Civil Rights Division. Assistant U.S. Attorney Janet Kim sat with a legal pad in front of her, pen unmoving as she took it all in. "Walk us through yesterday," Janet said quietly, "from your perspective as both investigator and victim." Kesha clicked to the next slide. A still frame of herself on the bench, Amara blurred in the background. She felt the entire room waiting. At 14:47 hours, she began, Officer Whitman initiated contact. No prior complaints, no radio calls referencing my presence. He fabricated alleged community concerns about loitering and inappropriate behavior. She recited each step with the precision of a case agent, not the tremor of a woman who had felt his hand connect with her skin. When he could not provoke compliance, he escalated to threats involving Child Protective Services. His language was explicitly racialized. She paused, letting that word sit in the air. And then, in full view of multiple witnesses, he struck me. On the screen behind her, the videos remained frozen at the moment just before impact. No one in the room needed to see it again to understand the gravity. Down the hall, in interview room 3, the man at the center of the storm sat in a metal chair, wrists resting on the table, eyes rimmed red from a night without sleep. Officer Whitman, Special Agent Marcus Carter said, "You understand this interview is being recorded." Derek nodded, gaze flicking to the camera in the corner. Across from him, DOJ attorney Sarah Rodriguez opened a folder. Her tone held no warmth. "We have you here because multiple pieces of footage show you making contact with a woman in a public park. We also have your written report stating there was no physical contact and that the subject was agitated, possibly intoxicated. Do you stand by that report?" Derek swallowed. "She was hostile," he said. "In my experience, women like that, if you do not assert control, the situation can spiral. I did what I had to do." "Women like what?" Agent Carter asked. "As single mothers on the system," Derek said, the words tumbling out faster than his brain could filter them. "Looking for a payout. They know how to play the victim card." Sarah slid a photo across the table. Kesha's official FBI ID, cropped and printed in color. "Do you recognize this woman?" He stared down at the picture. It took a full second for his brain to connect the crisp professional headshot with the hoodie and jeans in the park. "That is not possible," he whispered. "That is not her." "She did not say she was." "A federal agent," Sarah finished. "No, she did not. Because she did not have to. Civilians enjoy constitutional protection whether or not they flash a badge." Agent Carter leaned forward. "When you hit her, who did you think she was?" "Officer, when you raised your hand, did you see a person whose rights you were sworn to protect? Or just another black mom who would get chewed up and spit out by the complaint process like all the others?" Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. Sweat beaded at his hairline. He looked briefly, desperately toward the door, as if a union rep or a friendly sergeant might burst in and explain this away. No one came. In interview room 4, Maria Rodriguez sat with her hands clasped so tight her knuckles blanched. "Why did you not intervene?" Agent Carter asked her. "You saw your partner escalate. You heard the language. You knew there were children present. Why did you not step between him and Ms. Washington?" Maria stared at the tabletop. "If I go against my partner in front of civilians," she said slowly, "I am done. No one backs me up. No one rides with me. Everyone remembers the one who broke the line." "And if you do nothing?" Sarah asked. "What happens then?" She saw it again, in her mind. Kesha's head snapping to the side. Amara's scream. Her own feet frozen to the ground. "Then I get to sleep at night, pretending I did not have a choice," Maria said, voice cracking. "Except I do not sleep." "Why did you sign the report?" Carter pressed. "Because that is what we do," she answered. "We protect our own." She looked up finally, eyes wet and furious with herself. "But sitting here now, I know that is a lie. We do not protect our own. We protect the uniform. We sacrifice everyone else for it, even ourselves." At the center of it all, in yet another room, with yet another recording device, Kesha answered questions she had asked other victims 100 times. "Can you describe your emotional state immediately following the incident? Have you experienced nightmares, flashbacks, increased anxiety? Do you feel safe continuing to live in your current residence?" She recognized the script, the careful phrasing, the boxes to be checked for trauma. She answered honestly without letting herself drown in it. Yes, she had nightmares. Yes, she heard Amara's voice in the middle of the day when a car door slammed too loud. No, she did not intend to move. She refused to be chased out of the neighborhood she had been assigned to protect. Then the forms shifted, the questions turning clinical in a different way. Describe Officer Whitman's tone. Approximate distance between you at time of contact. Were you given any lawful order prior to the strike? Here, she became an agent again, detaching enough to dissect the scene as if it belonged to someone else. She knew these details would matter in court. She also knew that every time she repeated them, the moment carved a deeper groove in her memory. In a small office across town, a therapist specialized in childhood trauma slid a box of crayons across a low table. "Can you draw what the park looks like now?" she asked Amara. The girl drew a swing set and a tree. Then, in the corner, a police car. She colored the windows black. "They cannot see us," she explained. "If they cannot see us, they cannot hurt my mom." Outside, the city strained at a breaking point. Protesters gathered with signs outside District 18, chanting for accountability. Other residents stayed home, blinds half closed, watching the coverage with a mix of hope and dread. A group of officers huddled in the locker room, trading dark jokes about witch hunts and federal overreach. More than one thought of their own reports, their own bad days, and wondered where the line really was. Late that night, long after the protesters' voices had faded and the news vans had packed up, Commander Hayes sat alone in her office. A thick stack of files lay open on her desk, the air heavy with dust and old coffee. Complaints against Officer Derek Whitman, the labels read. She flipped through them, one by one. Unprofessional conduct, unnecessary questioning, alleged bias in enforcement. Each form carried the same neat resolution at the bottom. Unfounded, resolved by counseling. No further action taken. On more of them than she cared to admit, her signature sat in blue ink. P. Hayes. Approving. Dismissing. Moving on. Her eyes burned as she stared at the pile. For years, she had told herself she was doing the best she could inside a broken machine. That you pick your battles. That you cannot sink a career over every complaint. Now the image of Kesha on that bench, head snapping to the side, refused to leave her. Alongside it, the faces of Mrs. Rodriguez, the Hernandez kids, Mr. Johnson's son, all layered over the same man in the same uniform. Derek did not appear out of nowhere, she realized. He was exactly what they had allowed him to become. Her hand hovered over the top file, then fell away. Derek did not come out of a vacuum, she thought grimly. He was the perfect product of every time she had closed her eyes and signed her name anyway. The crawl at the bottom of the TV changed before Kesha was ready for it. She was in the living room folding Amara's t-shirts when the anchor's voice shifted tone, that practiced blend of outrage and intrigue. In an unexpected development to a story that has gripped Chicago, the woman assaulted in Riverside Park has been identified as Special Agent Kesha Washington of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The graphics slid across the screen. Single black mom assaulted in park turns out to be undercover. FBI agent. Amara looked up from her coloring book on the floor. "Mama, that is your name." Kesha moved closer, remote heavy in her hand. On the screen, they showed the same bench, the same tree, but now the footage was cut together with her official photo. Hair smoothed, blazer crisp, the golden letters FBI visible on the podium behind her in some long forgotten press conference. Neighbors who had watched the first videos with quiet horror now watched with their mouths open. She is FBI. Well, I will be damned. They hit a Fed. That is different. Different. The word landed harder than it should. Keisha muted the TV. "So you are a superhero now," Amara said, trying on a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Like in the movies." "No, baby," Kesha replied softly. "I am the same person I was on that bench." She did not say the rest out loud. That, on that bench, with his hand coming toward her, none of it mattered. Not the years of service, not the bureau, not the federal training. In Derek Whitman's eyes, she had been exactly what he decided she was the moment he laid eyes on her. A black woman alone, with no one who counted enough to protect her. At the FBI field office, Conference Room B felt smaller than before. The air was thick with stale coffee and the weight of too many eyes on one woman. The cameras are already framing this as a big win, Deputy Director Mitchell said, remote in hand as she watched a news segment replay without sound. The plucky undercover agent takes on the bad cop. America loves that story. Around the table sat Janet Kim, Agent Marcus Carter, Sarah Rodriguez from DOJ, and a handful of others whose names Keisha barely registered. She felt strangely separate from all of them, as if she were watching this from a seat in the back of the room instead of standing at the center. We can win this case, Mitchell continued. Legally, we have more than enough. Multiple angles, documented patterns, a false report. She clicked the TV off and turned to face Keisha fully. But you do understand, right, that for most of the people you have been out there watching, none of this exists. What do you mean? Kesha asked, though she knew. Mitchell's gaze was steady. I mean that you are a federal agent with a spotless record, a recorded incident, and a team of lawyers and investigators behind you, she said. We were always going to take you seriously. What keeps me up at night is how many Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Johnsons there are who filed complaints, got rubber stamped as unfounded, and never heard another word. How many of them were hit, or shoved, or humiliated, without a single camera rolling. The room went quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. Janet tapped her pen against her pad. We are going to make an example out of him, she said, out of the department policies that kept him in play. That is good. It is necessary. But those families do not get these war rooms. They get form letters. The realization slid into Keisha's chest like a knife that had been there all along, waiting. For years, she had stood on the side of the table where she was standing now, looking across at people with shaking hands and breaking voices. She had told them to trust the process, to be patient, to let the system work. She had believed that the badge on her hip, the seal on the letterhead, meant the universe of power tilted slightly in her favor, that if things ever got personal, the same machinery would roar to life to protect her. On that bench, when his shadow fell over her, and his words hit harder than his hand ever could, none of that had made a difference. She had not looked like a federal agent. She had looked like every woman she had ever interviewed who started sentences with, "I was just sitting there when..." In interview room 4, Maria Rodriguez stared at the FBI business card on the table as if it were a verdict. Let me be clear, Janet said to her, voice more gentle than it had been with Derek. No one is here to make you a hero. You stood there and watched. You signed a false report. That has consequences. I know, Maria whispered. But you are here now, Mitchell added, which is more than I can say for a lot of people higher up the food chain. If you want to start telling the truth, this is the time. Maria's fingers twisted in her lap. You ever hear that phrase? Better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6, she said. Academy instructors used to say it all the time. Somewhere along the way, we started living by something else. Better to be hated by the neighborhood than frozen out by your own. She lifted her eyes, sweat shining at her temples. When those complaints came in, we all knew what would happen, she went on. Patrol room gossip, sergeant rolling his eyes, counselings that were just jokes. If you challenged that, you were difficult. You did not get special details. You did not get backup. So you shut up. You pretend you do not see. Or you tell yourself you are doing good in other ways. So it balances out. Does it? Keisha asked quietly. Maria held her gaze. No, she said. It does not. And if putting that on record helps you take his badge and force some changes, then yeah, I will talk. Later, in the small office that now doubled as her debriefing space, Kesha sat across from Marcus, shoes off, blazer draped over the back of the chair. The bruise on her cheek had faded to the barest shadow, but she still felt it sometimes when she was not thinking about it, like a ghost touch. What is going on in your head? He asked. She let out a long breath. I have spent my entire career believing one thing, she said, that as long as we are the ones on this side of the badge, we're protected, not from everything, but from the worst. That if something happened, the machine would move for us the way it never moves for the people we serve. And now, Marcus prompted, now I know that in the moment it mattered most, he did not see any of that, she replied. He saw a black woman on a bench. The same black women whose complaints I have watched get filed and buried and forgotten. The only difference this time is that the government cared who she was afterwards. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You are allowed to be angry at that, he said. I am, she agreed, but I am also angry at myself, at how many cases I looked at and thought, we cannot win this one or the evidence is too thin, and then moved on. It is a luxury to walk away from someone else's trauma because the file is inconvenient. She rubbed her face, fingers pausing over the place his hand had landed. I have been telling myself for years that I am one of the good ones because I fight from inside, she said. But I have also enjoyed being on the right side of that badge, the side that gets escorted through protests and waved past checkpoints, until the day the badge did not stop his arm from swinging. Outside, traffic moved along Michigan Avenue, oblivious. Inside, the walls seemed closer than they had before. Mitchell knocked once and stepped in. "Press is going to have a field day with your story," she said. "We can lean into the undercover hero angle, or we can keep emphasizing the pattern." "I am inclined to do the second." Keisha straightened. "Use me," she said. "If my title and my status make it harder for them to dismiss what we have uncovered, use that. But do not let them make this about one bad apple and one special victim." Mitchell studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We will win this case," she said. "I do not have doubts about that anymore. But never forget, Agent Washington, that the reason we can is because you are who you are. The question we have to live with is how many people who are not you lost before we started paying attention." That night, Keisha sat at her kitchen table again, the same spot where she had stared at her buzzing phone days earlier. Amara was asleep down the hall after another session with the therapist, this one ending with a picture of a park where the police car was drawn small and far away. On Keisha's laptop, an email draft glowed. She was writing to a community organizer who had been leaving voicemails about forming a local advisory board. It was the kind of message she would normally send from her work address, clinical and distant. Instead, she wrote as both pieces of herself, as the agent who knew the language of consent decrees and oversight, and as the mother who knew what mulch felt like under her shoes when the world narrowed to the sound of a single crack and her child's scream. She paused, reading over the words, then closed the laptop gently. It struck her with sudden clarity that the most permanent damage Wittman had done was not the fading bruise, not even the fear he had planted in her daughter's dreams. It was the hairline fracture in her belief that carrying the right credentials and following the right procedures was enough to keep anyone truly safe. The bruise would vanish. The file would grow thick. The court dates would come and go. The crack in her faith in the system, though, was something else entirely. She realized with a mix of grief and a strange, sharp relief that the greatest consequence of that slap was not the mark it left on her skin, but the fracture it opened in her own certainty, just wide enough for a different kind of light to get through. The federal courtroom is colder than Keisha expected. Derek Wittman stands at the defense table in a suit 2 sizes too big, the swagger gone, shoulders slumped like someone who finally understands gravity. No badge, no gun. Just another defendant waiting to hear what the law thinks of him now. Judge Patricia Morrison adjusts her glasses and reads from the file. "Mr. Wittman, you are charged under Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, with willfully depriving Special Agent Keisha Washington of rights protected by the Constitution while acting under color of law. Do you understand these charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," he murmurs. "You are entering a plea of guilty under this agreement. You accept a federal prison sentence, supervised release, permanent prohibition from law enforcement employment, and cooperation with ongoing investigations into patterns of misconduct within the Chicago Police Department. Is that correct?" He nods. His voice cracks on the word yes. Later, he will stand in front of fresh-faced police cadets and explain what happens when you treat a uniform like a crown and a community like a kingdom. Part of the deal, part of the price. For CPD, the price comes dressed as reform. A consent decree signed in black ink that will haunt the department for years. Mandatory body cameras, new training, civilian oversight boards with real teeth. Commander Patricia Hayes sits at a separate table, waiting to testify about every complaint she signed off on, every red flag she helped file away. Maria Rodriguez is in the gallery, not in uniform, but in a simple blouse and slacks. She resigned months ago, trading her badge for night classes and volunteer shifts at a legal clinic. The guilt has not left her, but it has finally found somewhere to go. On paper, Keisha comes out ahead. Commendations, a successful civil rights case, her name mentioned in the same breath as landmark consent decrees. She shakes hands with people who call her brave and necessary, and exactly why we still believe in the system. At home, Amara still wakes some nights with tears on her cheeks. "Are the police good now, Mama?" she asks, or just scared Keisha never has an answer that fits into a bedtime story. Outside the courthouse, cameras flash as she lifts Amara onto her hip and pushes through the crowd. The marble steps feel steeper than they did going in. Reporters shout her name, but the only voice she hears is her daughter's, small and insistent in her ear. "Is it over now? Mama, is it really over?" Keisha presses a kiss to her temple and keeps walking. For him, it is mostly over, she says quietly. For people like us, baby, this is only the beginning. A year later, Riverside Park looked the same on the surface. Same faded slide, same stubborn fountain, same maple tree shading the old bench. But the air felt different. Kids of every shade raced across the grass, arguing about turns on the swings instead of which families belong there. Two uniformed officers set up tables for a community barbecue, joking with parents, passing out juice boxes instead of threats. Their eyes scanned for safety now, not for targets. On the bench beneath the maple, Kesha Washington watched her daughter climb the monkey bars that had once stood in the shadow of sirens and shouting. "Mama, look," Amara called, hanging upside down, braids swinging. "I'm not scared anymore." It was a small sentence, said between giggles, but Keisha felt the weight of a year in it. Courtrooms, interviews, therapy appointments, nights spent reassuring a child that the world could still be trusted in pieces. Someone cleared her throat softly. Kesha turned to see Maria Rodriguez standing a few feet away in jeans and a sweatshirt, hands pushed awkwardly into her pockets. "Mind if I sit?" Maria asked. "You already did the hardest part," Kesha replied. "Sitting is the easy one." They watched the playground together. "Recruits have to live here now," Maria said after a while. 2 weeks in the neighborhood before they get a badge. No patrol car, no uniform, just them and the people they are supposed to serve. They have to write about what they learn. Some of them are shocked to find out these kids know their names before they ever learn the law. Kesha smiled, tired but genuine. "Power is heavier when you know who it sits on," she said. Maria stared at her own hands. "I spent years saying nothing," she admitted. "That is my part of this. Silence is not neutral. It always leans toward whoever already has the advantage." Kesha thought about her own silence, the cases she had filed away because the evidence was messy or the odds were bad, the way she had trusted the system to bend itself toward justice without needing to be pushed. "Consequence does not just show up to punish," she said quietly. "It shows up to tell us who we have been all along." Later, as the sun slid lower and the park filled with the sound of children and grills and music, Kesha's thoughts drifted outward, past her own bench, past her own city. How many times have we stood in parks, in parking lots, in checkout lines, and seen someone treated as less than and decided it was not our business? How many Derricks grew bold because the only response they ever met was a turned head, a nervous laugh, a quiet, "I do not want trouble." She did not see herself as flawless. Not anymore. She was a mother and an agent who had once believed the machine would fix itself if she just fed it enough clean reports. Now she understood that systems do not change on their own. They change when people inside and outside push in the same direction, when witnesses refuse to be decorations in someone else's narrative. For Derek Whitman, the worst part of his sentence was not the lost paychecks or the empty holster. It was standing in front of young recruits and having to call the people he once dismissed by their rightful name, citizens, and explain how it feels when the law finally treats you as the problem instead of the shield. The slap in the park stopped echoing through Riverside a long time ago, but its sound is still alive in every moment when you see someone's dignity under attack and have to decide whether to lower your eyes or raise your voice. So now it is your turn. If you had been in that park that day, where would you have stood? With the silence or with the witness? If this story moved you, share it, leave a comment, and support this channel so we can keep telling the kind of stories that make us all look a little closer at the world we live in. Because the next time injustice speaks up in front of you, the real question will not be what happened in Riverside Park. It will be what you choose to do.